You know a country is in deep trouble when its own premier, the guy in charge of managing the entire economy, flat out says, "I don't trust our GDP numbers." That's not a joke. That actually happened. The man was Li Keqiang, and he wasn't some fringe dissident. He was premier of the State Council of the People's Republic of China, the number 2 in the country, right under Xi Jinping. He said the official GDP numbers were, quote, for reference only, because they are man-made. Imagine Janet Yellen or Jay Powell whispering to foreign diplomats, "Don't believe the US numbers we publish, we make them up." That's the scale of what Li Keqiang said. But here's what makes it even more astonishing. He said this to the US Embassy. It was leaked through WikiLeaks in 2010. And while the Western press gave it a few headlines, most analysts and investors just shrugged it off and kept pouring money into the China story. Well, Li Keqiang tried to tell us the truth about Chinese economy, and now the bill is coming due. Now, who was Li Keqiang? Li Keqiang was no fool. He was no puppet either. He had a law degree from Peking University and a PhD in economics. He was even fluent in English. People forget this, but back in the late 2000s, he was actually favored by many reformers as a potential liberalizing force in China's leadership. He was supposed to be the successor to Hu Jintao, and for a while it looked like he might be. But the party had other plans. Xi Jinping eventually leapfrogged him in 2012. Still, Li was handed the second most powerful job in the country. As premier, he managed China's economy, oversaw reforms, and ran the bureaucracy. On paper, he had massive authority, but in practice, Xi Jinping hollowed out that role. Over the years, Li was pushed further and further into the background. He didn't control key appointments, he couldn't set the agenda, he was just there to look competent while Xi made all the real decisions. But back to the original comment. When Li told US diplomats that China's GDP figures were unreliable, he wasn't being cynical, he was being honest. Painfully, dangerously honest. Because here's the truth. Local officials in China are promoted based on hitting growth targets. So what do? They fudge the numbers. They invent some projects, double count output, and paper over the bad debts. And Beijing puts it all together and calls it 6 or 7 or 8% growth. Li Keqiang didn't buy it. So he came up with his own metric. What did he check? Well, electricity consumption, rail cargo volume, and bank loan disbursement. That's it. The Li Keqiang Index. Think about that. The guy running the world's second largest economy didn't trust his own stats team. He had to look at freight rail and power usage to figure out what was actually going on. And guess what? It showed that growth was way lower than the official figures. That should have been a wake-up call. But Wall Street didn't care. Neither did Beijing. Let me tell you what this reminds me of. Back when I was working with investors focused on Asia, we used to joke that if a Chinese company said they had $1 billion in cash, you could probably count on maybe 300 million of it being real. The rest was fog, fantasy, and funny accounting. Everyone in the room knew the numbers were fake, but the trade worked, so no one cared. And that's the world Li Keqiang lived in too. He had to watch while banks issued bad loans to zombie SOE companies, while empty apartment towers kept rising across ghost cities, while official stats show 6% growth while electricity demand was flatlining. And when he tried to nudge the country toward reform, Xi Jinping shut him down. The premier who understood markets, who trusted facts, who tried to be a realist, was sidelined in favor of ideology and control. That's not an exaggeration. That's the playbook. Li Keqiang stepped down in March 2023. He was 68. By CCP standards, that's retirement age. He gave his last speech, stayed polite, and faded from view. And then in October, just 7 months later, he was dead. A heart attack, they said, while swimming in Shanghai. Now look, I'm not going to play conspiracy theorist, but this was a guy with no major health problems who died suddenly in a country where a lot of political enemies have accidents. And what happened after his death? No national day of mourning, no full funeral broadcast, no celebration of a decade as premier, just a few sanitized obituaries and silence. In China, that silence says everything. Li Keqiang tried to warn us, not in public speeches, not in dramatic headlines, but in quiet, careful, off-the-record conversations. He knew the rot beneath China's miracle. He saw the data gains, the bad debt, the real estate bubble, the demographic time bomb. And he knew the price of ignoring it. We're seeing it right now. Consumer spending is frozen. Youth unemployment is off the charts. Local governments are drowning in debt. Foreign capital is fleeing. But Beijing still insists GDP will grow by more than 5%. Because to Xi Jinping, the number is the message. Whether it's real or not doesn't matter. Well, Li Keqiang disagreed, and now he's gone. Li wasn't a revolutionary, don't get me wrong. He wasn't trying to overthrow the system. He believed in the China project. He just wanted to be grounded in truth. But in Xi's China, truth is the first casualty. And so Li Keqiang became the last voice of reason in a system that chose fantasy. He didn't leave behind a memoir. He left a warning, and the rest of the world would do well to listen.